And salutations everyone. With the new patch, Visions of N'Zoth, finally out and about, and my speculation well dried up for the moment, I thought it would be fun to discuss my overall thoughts and experiences on the patch, both positive and the unfortunate negative. So let's get started with a recap of what goes down in this patch. Vision of N'Zoth starts where we left off. During the climatic end of Ajara's Eternal Palace, the Queen successfully managed to free N'Zoth by breaking his chains with the Heart of Azeroth that we had been powering up. N'Zoth then gathered his partner in crime and took off to where we now know is Ny'alotha. Following this, a rebellion against Sylvanas was enacted by the joint forces of the Horde and the Alliance to end her reign, resulting in her yeeting on out of there and peace talks being opened thanks to Sarfang's heroic sacrifice. Meanwhile, one of the few uncorrupted Black Dragons, Wrathion, who was responsible for the events of the Burning Legion's return, has been searching on ways to defeat the Old Gods and fight against their whispers. He joins up with Magni and heads on over to Stormwind, where the plans on fighting the Old God N'Zoth take place. Having Wrathion at the forefront of the story is great, as he's always been a character fairly underutilized for quite some time, and having some interactions between his bestie Anduin again is also pretty great. We also have Bane and Mela representing the Horde, as the two factions work together against this threat, further showing the peace and unity they're attempting. Magni, knowing full well they're about to have a fight on their hands, also finally takes up his old mace, Fearbreaker, which has exchanged many hands since his untimely crystalling back during the early days of the Cataclysm. Our adventures begin with fully utilizing the multiple Titan stations throughout the world. The plan is to use these structures, mainly the Forge of Origination, against N'Zoth to end him once and for all. This calls for the return of an old zone from the days of the Cataclysm, the sandy lands of Uldum. However, N'Zoth the Corruptor is a crafty one, and managed to get to Uldum and the Forge before we did, knowing full well the potential threat this pyramid carries. This leads us to unite with the denizens of Uldum, the Remaken, the Wastewanders, and the Explorers League. While N'Zoth is out and about above Uldum, there is also the threat of a Tovir group known as the Amethyst, who wish to activate the Forge in the name of the Titans to not only get rid of the Old God's corruption, but also all life on Azeroth, as they deem everybody as corrupted. I know that many felt cheated out of a brand new zone with this patch, and it is an understandable complaint. However, returning to both Uldum and the Vale of Eternal Blossoms is something I welcome. Both zones still hold up a decade later, and also we get to see the Vale, mostly, before Garrosh ruined it. Another welcome thing, as the Vale was beautiful. Speaking of the Vale, the Forge of Origination turns out to not have enough power. Thus, it is ultimately decided that the engine of Nalak Shah in Pandaria should do the trick. We head on over to it within the Mogushan vaults, but it is unfortunately blocked by a wall of amber and the corpses of Mogu. Only one Mogu is left, and he tells us to meet with his clan. A friendly Mogu was non-existent in Pandaria, even in the days of old. So we deliver the Mogu sigil to Lorwalker Cho, where we are given some good old-fashioned lore lessons from the lovable Lorewalker. It literally feels like a page out of Pandaria, and I just ate it up and wanted more. But unfortunately, this is all we get from the good old Lorewalker, who sends us on our way to Lei Shen's former treasury, which now acts as a base for these friendly Mogu known as the Rajani. The Rajani tells us of what has become of the Vale during our absence. While it had been restored to its former glory, the old god N'Zoth, much like his older and stronger brother Y'Shaarj, focused his attention on it and used the Mantid Swarm, led by their queen, to encroach upon it. There's also the issue of the Mogu who are attempting to retake the Veil and secure their place as Pandaria's rightful rulers again. This is also where we reunite with Highkeeper Ra-Den. The last time we saw him was at the bottom of the Throne of Thunder, where he had been for centuries, lying in anguish over the disappearance of the Titans after they had been removed by Sargeras. We proved ourselves to Ra-Den to at least try at confronting the very darkness he had feared. Seeing both the Mogu and the Mantid is always a treat, as the Pandaren lore and races were always so interesting and great to me. Really flip-sided this time around with the Mantid being aggressive and the Mogu showing signs of working with us. A complete contrast to how things were back in the days of Pandaria, where the Mantid worked with us for a bit, and the Mogu were one of our main enemies. Ra-Den in his exile commands over the Rajani Mogu clan in restoring the Veil and keeping it safe. He gives us the information that the engine of Nalak Shah is accessible throughout various places in Pandaria, telling us the Mogushan Palace is a great place to start. So we head on over there, clear up the Mantid and Old God corruption, and then set up the engine of Nalak Shah to help power up the Chamber of Heart. Heading back, we successfully convince Ra-Den to join with us to the chamber, learning along the way that a fellow Titan Keeper, Arcadis, helped design said chamber. How unfortunate that heroes killed that poor sap in Classic. With everything set up, we head on over back to the Forge of Origination, as an anomaly is detected. We also learn that in order for the Forge to work exactly what we need to place the anchors around or close to N'Zoth. Unfortunately, the Corruptor is only found in Ny'alotha. An echo of the Black Empire is found, and we do not have the capacity to fight against such corruption. Luckily, our legendary providing friend Rathian has the means and method for us to handle it within the halls of the Blackwing Descent. As before, N'Zoth's forces are here before we arrive, already meddling with the experience Neltharion had crafted in the past. Neltharion's goal was to create a flight able to harness the powers of all of the dragonflights combined, and while only successful with some of these, they still pose a threat, or at the very least, a good distraction. Located here are Inquisitor Xanesh and Vexiona. Xanesh being one of the more faithful and brutal cultists of N'Zoth remaining, and Vexiona a void dragon in service of N'Zoth, who we've ran into before when empowering our Heart of Azeroth. Together, they plot to use Rathian just as they did with the rest of his dragonflight. But Rathian, he's not easily broken.
Enough! You cannot break me like you broke my father! The Black Dragonflight will purge your master from Azeroth!
Impudent dragon! All of your kind will bow before N'Zoth!
With me, champion. Let us bring this to an end.
Xanesh and Vexiona of course escape and would be later dealt with in Ny'alotha itself. Meanwhile, we would acquire what we came here for the remaining scales of both Neltharion and Onyxia, which would provide us with a means to fight off N'Zoth's corruption. Seeing Rathian, who we knew from an egg growing to a whelp, and now a drake resembling that of his father, will always be both touching and epic to me. I'm very proud of our boy. He's come a long way from assassinating his corrupted brothers and sisters. With our newly acquired cloak, something Rathian seems to have a knack for making, we head back to enter the vision and end the anomaly preventing us from using the Forge of Origination on N'Zoth. With some teleportation provided by Mother, thank goodness, we return to the chambers to hear Ra-Den flirting with her. I guess when you come out of depression like that, some good old loving with someone might do you some good, I guess. Now Rathian provides us a means to enter into the reality, or a glimmer of it at least, of what N'Zoth wants to make come true with these visions. Here we see the horrors of either Orgrimmar or Stormwind, Illyria broken by the whispers, or Thrall willing to hear them. Various other characters like Rexxar, Master Umbric, and so forth also fall to these visions, unfortunately. But on the brighter side, these visions aren't real, and Rexxar is okay. And that Umbric guy too, I guess. Here, we get a taste of what N'Zoth is cooking up for us, and of course, we don't want him to make it come real. But it is a good way for us to test the waters of what we're going to be dealing with within Ny'alotha. Unfortunately, such methods of testing have consequences, and N'Zoth invades the Chamber of Heart.
The final truth in form.
We're going to lose the chamber! There's no way to stop him!
There is always a way. Save our world, champion, no matter the cost.
Highkeeper Ra-Den, much like his brother Tyr, sacrificed his own life to save others and give us a chance to stop N'Zoth and save Azeroth. Twisted in Ny'alotha, we would free him later from being a servant to N'Zoth, but at the cost of his own life. Ra-Den was a true badass and will be missed. That concludes the base story of Visions of N'Zoth, but there are a few little things to talk about before we get into the raid, and then I can talk about what I liked and what I didn't like. A few of the smaller things we are tasked with is some different questlines in each invasion of N'Zoth in a zone, followed by their own music too, which I thought was pretty cool. For instance, you deal with and defeat the Amethets trying to activate the Forge and erase all of life and all of the old gods. You also deal with the Akir, the original bug race in servitude to N'Zoth, swarming across Uldum at the call of Prophet Zakira, a powerful illusionist who nearly has us blast the Waste Wander's base to oblivion. In the Vale of Eternal Blossom, you deal with the rise of an uprising of the Bogu, not seen since the days of Lei Shen, with the aid of Brewmaster Chen and the unaging Lili. Seriously, you guys should give her an updated model of some kind soon. You also deal with the Manted Swarm and their new allegiance to N'Zoth, led by their new Empress Shakzira, with the aid of the Shadowpan Assassin, getting rid of their Amber that was also being corrupted by the Faceless Ones, sent to empower the Swarm. I'm sure there might be more I'm missing as they do rotate, but these little questlines, they are all actually pretty great and a nice nod to both Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria. Now, as I'm not an avid raider that I used to be, I can't exactly spill the beans of the entire story of the raid, but I can at the very least talk about its conclusion and what follows after. Entering Ny'alotha, the Sleeping City, we deal with various bosses and opponents throughout the raid, fully equipped with our Sanity Fighting Cloak that Rathian gave us just for the occasion. In the city, we find the imprisoned Queen Ajara, who was being tortured by Xanesh, whom we kill. She provides us the means to ending N'Zoth, or at the very least presenting the way for us to kill him with the Blade of the Black Empire, which has exchanged many hands throughout this expansion. Supposedly, it holds the power to end an old god, which she fully planned to do before we came along and wrecked her shit. Ajara makes her leave to plot another day, while our favorite black dragon, Rathian, studies said dagger for any shenanigans and then makes his move against N'Zoth. not exactly what I expected for him to do with the dagger, but hey, it's effective, I suppose. The blade of the Black Empire itself is either destroyed, disappeared, or something else altogether. But regardless of what happened to it, it provides us a way to N'Zoth, after of course defeating that gross-looking faceless one. I actually really like this cinematic as it demonstrated Rathian's skills, smugness, and showing off his badass Drake form that again resembles his father. Rathian truly is the MVP of this patch. We enter in and deal with N'Zoth, but not before succumbing to the whispers of the Corruptor. Hope seems to be fruitless, but Magni reminds us of who we are, and we rise up and give N'Zoth the same treatment that was done to dear old Deathwing. Now that's just karma, buddy. And that's it, nothing else to talk about. No siree. Nope. Okay, yes, there is something to discuss here, unfortunately. N'Zoth is blown away and his city of dreams goes away along with it. Magni congratulates us, Azeroth is freed from the old gods, and yada yada yada, this is a poor ending. I'll definitely get into this more really shortly, but hot damn, this is not how things should have ended in Battle for Azeroth. I don't know what went wrong, but this definitely is the most disappointing thing out of the patch and the expansion for me. On the brighter side of things to end with, in my opinion, the Horde and Alliance get their own conclusions. Let's cover the Horde first since it happens chronologically before this one, I think. The Horde leaders meet in the building known as the Embassy. Here we have Thrall, Lorthamar, Bane, Rokan, Voss, Gazlo, G, Thalitisra, and Gaira, who all come to the agreement the title of War Chief must be ended for times of peace, and that a council will take its place. I made a video talking about this in greater detail, but the Horde is finally shaping up to be brighter, especially with Rokan, Gazlo, and Voss all taking leadership over their respective race. Also, Thrall is back for good to lead the orcs, it seems, which is a very, very welcome thing indeed. He's even the one to push the idea of no more war chief, and to install Gazlo as the leader of the goblins, basically making amends for allowing Galliwix to remain as trait prince all those years ago. Meanwhile, the Alliance leaders all gather to sign an armistice to be had with the Horde, which is basically a truce to stop the fighting, even if it's for a short time. However, Tyrande isn't too happy about it, and won't consider peace until Sylvanas is dead, and believes that the Horde's promises mean nothing. The conflict between the Alliance seems to be on the rise, and it makes you wonder if the Alliance is about to see cracks within its ranks. I, for one, am all for it. And that is the thrilling conclusion of Battle for Azeroth. And now to give my thoughts on the patch. My thoughts on the overall expansion will come out eventually. Anyways, let's start out with the good. The return of Rathian. Rathian had been absent realistically since the end of Mists of Pandaria, 2013, 7 years ago, with minor cameos here and there that sadly got scrapped most of the time. Here, he is back with a brand new human and dragon model, seems to have matured a bit, and is redeeming his dragonflight. He is definitely a character I hope they use more of in the future, and he is one of the few highlights of the patch. Magni is better. A character that I previously saw as an annoyance or a bore feels better for reasons I can't entirely identify. Taking up Fearbreaker and slamming down on the Servants of N'Zoth, it just felt satisfying to see the once King of Ironforge show off his strength instead of yelling at us to save Azeroth's wounds or whatever. It was a delight to have him in action for once. Return to the old world. Going back to both Pandaria and Oldham was a real treat. I felt memories from those better times flood back to me. It also felt like time did in fact pass while we were away, for those canonically 5 years. In Oldham, the Remakan established themselves as the dominant Tol'vir faction. The Waste Wanderers, who were once a negative faction of humans, became instead some very helpful allies who call these sands their home. Also, Uldum is no longer just some Indiana Jones parody, which, while fun at the time, did overshadow what was at stake in the zone back then. Now it's far more serious and far more welcoming, in my opinion. In Pandaria, the Mogu are still a threat, but also have a clan re-established by Raiden to be what they once were. The Mantid, who we knew served the old gods and had a new queen, pose a greater threat, and the Shadowpan are of course making a stand against them. Also, the beautiful and stunning Vale is back to the way it once was, just as Xiaohao promised it would be all those years ago. Of course, it goes back to being all void corrupted now and then too, but that's a small little thing to sacrifice for how good it looks again now. It truly was good to come back to these places, and I hope one day they do a revamp, or at the very least, do this sort of thing again. Visions of N'Zoth are fun and creative. The Visions of N'Zoth are a reminder of the Mage Tower and the deaths of Chromie, albeit easier and less repetitive. They're a very creative way to show a what if the villain wins, which I think are always fun, especially if you're a writer who likes to do AU realities. The visions are actually pretty great. The only downside is how long it takes to get the item to actually do them, which they have actually changed up how the dailies reward now, so it's a little bit easier to get them now, honestly. Other than that, they are a welcome thing to do while we wait for Shadowlands. Ajara isn't done yet. One of the biggest fears I had with the addition of Queen Ajara is they were just going to do away with her in 1 to 2 patches, either in Rise of Ajara or here within Visions of N'Zoth. I can happily say that she isn't dead, and they're clearly not done with her yet. One of the biggest problems I see tends to happen with characters like Ajara is that they are killed off in the very same expansion or patch they're introduced. So I'm very happy such a lore-heavy character like her will be around in the future. The Alliance possibly is in conflict. I'm sure this is, to some, would be seen as a bad thing, but the Alliance for too long, for me at least, has been way too perfect in its unity. At long last, the cracks are starting to show with Tyrande, and possibly again. I really hope this leads to somewhere at some point, and isn't just resolved in Shadowlands. I'm not saying a faction war or anything like it should happen soon, but should it ever happen again in the future, I would really like it if the Horde didn't start it. And speaking of the Horde, no more Warchief. Again, I did a video on this in greater detail, but finally, the Horde is no longer burdened by the title of Warchief, and the conflict it tends to cause for both the Horde, internally, as well as the rest of the world. This will allow the writers to focus on any of the leaders that they feel will push the story forward, rather than focusing on the one and only Warchief. No longer will there be another Garrosh or Sylvanas to corrupt the Horde and stain its ideals. It's also great we have new and old leaders like Thrall, Voss, Gazlo, and Rokhan taking up the place of their predecessors. It truly feels like Varrock Sarfang left an impact on the Horde, rather than his actions being brushed to the side. This is a positive Horde leadership we've not seen since the days of Wrath of the Lich King, in my opinion, and it makes me incredibly happy. Can't wait to see the future of the Horde going forward with this council. Alright, now that we've covered what I liked in Visions of N'Zoth, let's get on with the bad. Mind you, there really were only nitpicks at first before the ending happened, so a big portion of this will be on that cinematic. Where are the factions during all of this? This is a rather minor, as I can understand why they decided to turn the Horde and the Alliance on the back burner to focus instead on Magni and Rathian. I gotta say, they start off with going to Stormwind to address the Alliance and the Horde, mainly Mela and Bane, and how to deal with N'Zoth, and it honestly goes nowhere. I guess the players are supposed to represent the soldiers going into Ny'alotha, but I just think things would have all come together if we had various Alliance and Horde characters, maybe the ones we see in the visions take the fight to N'Zoth. No new zone. So a bit of lying is involved in this one, but the lack thereof of a new zone is evident enough. Like I said, the revamped zones of both Oldham and the Vale are actually pretty great, but this patch definitely could have used Nyalotha or something. Hell, I was fully expecting that the Dragon Isles would play a role in this patch, but I was dead wrong, and hopefully it'll still play a role at some point. Again, I'm not bent out of shape over this, but it's an empty feeling for sure. Shigzara was wasted. Another minor one, but Empress Shigzara was kinda wasted as just another world boss. The quests they give you sort of address her at the very least, but she's pretty bland and barely seen, and not even given a voice actress. Considering they built her up since Mists, technically, I would have liked something more with her, I guess. The Manted Queen of the past didn't have too much going on with her either, but at the very least she felt like a threat who commanded fear, until, well, it killed her. I just felt like they could have done more with her than just another world boss. Really disappointing. Sargeras is what now? So, you guys remember how Battle for Azeroth all started, right? Big ol' Sargeras picked up his sword and stabbed it right into Azeroth, causing her to bleed out and potentially die. The Horde and the Alliance fighting over said blood and resulting into the Battle for Azeroth. No? Well, that's unresolved and is still sticking out of Silithus, and it can't be good for Azeroth. I get it, we probably don't or aren't ready for the oceans of Azerite that would cover most of Kalimdor if we pulled that bad boy out, I guess. But at least address it or do something with it. This would have been a perfect epilogue cinematic, or to include with the very ending of Battle for Azeroth. Oh god, right, we need to talk about that next. Just please, for the love of Rexxar, don't ignore this huge detail in Shadowlands, okay? I really just wanted Azeroth to form a hand and pull that sword out herself and give us a thumbs up to us or something. Is that too much to ask? Ugh. That ending. Overall, not too many negatives for me from this patch. However, there's an overall theme to all this that I think really puts a damper on this patch and even the expansion. That goddamn ending. Something the community and I for once are in agreement on is the conclusion of this expansion and patch. N'Zoth is blown away by the Champion's Defiance and the Chamber of Heart, blasting up Azerite all into N'Zoth's body, realm, and probably soul. And then it just ends. Not only was N'Zoth a character who orchestrated such events as the corruption of Ajara and the creation of the Naga, the corruption of Deathwing / Neltharion, the Emerald Nightmare, the Cataclysm, and so on. N'Zoth was built up as not just a big bad, but the big bad. I wouldn't put him on the levels of, say, Sargeras, but he caused so many problems and troubles for us, and it felt like the carrot of destruction was being waved in front of us, and that something massive was going to go down with this guy. N'Zoth needed more time and his own expansion. While he was teased since 8.1.5 and even Ajara's own Warbringer, I don't think that warrants for him to be killed off in the patch he was finally introduced to. I just gave them credit for not doing that to Ajara, who I will be honest is far more interesting than this guy. Even then though, the ending of N'Zoth being defeated was always possible. It could have, at the very least, had Rathian, Magni, Horde and Alliance leaders react to his death. Warlords of Draenor and Cataclysm, which are regarded to have some of the worst endings to their expansions, managed to do this at the very least by having the characters react to the Cataclysm finally ending, and the elements finally finding peace. Albeit cheesy, the various cities of Dalaran, Orgrimmar, and Stormwind threw up fireworks in the wake of Deathwing's death. On Draenor, the Defiler meets his end, sending Gul'dan to Azeroth to spark the events of Legion. Grom lifts up Gorhal and delivers a line, I'll meme to the days I'm wrinkled as Gul'Daniel, and everyone cheers and dances. Khadgar bails and makes his way for Draenor to fade into irrelevancy until Yrel gives a reason for the Maghar to join the Horde later. if we had a reaction from the characters, this could have been salvageable to me. But this unfortunately will be regarded as one of the worst endings of an expansion, and that'll sadly ripple to the worst expansion ever, which I don't agree with at all, as I greatly enjoyed Battle for Azeroth until this showed up. Something they need to stop doing, and I think they are, considering how Shadowlands seems to be prepped up with the Jailer and Sylvanas, is this mystery behind who the next villain is of the final expansion. Like, who's the final boss of the expansion? This isn't a Disney movie where you get a surprise villain, and by the way, Blizzard, those don't work either. Wrath of the Lich King had Arthas, Cataclysm had Deathwing, Mists of Pandaria had Garrosh. All were built up, mind you not perfectly, to be the final boss and something to look forward to. Had N'Zoth been built up since the start of Battle for Azeroth, and properly, I don't think this would have been as big of an issue as it is for everyone right now. All N'Zoth needed was time and an expansion, and he didn't get much of either. There's so many ways you could have ended it, but this was just half-baked. I personally would have had Rathian use the Blade of the Black Empire in N'Zoth's core, only for that to be exactly what he wanted him to do, providing N'Zoth a means to escape to be dealt with at a later date, but still mattering a lot as his whole body was still defeated and ultimately destroyed, freeing Azeroth and allowing her for a brief moment to remove Sargeras' sword herself. That's what I would have gone with, a victory but also the defeat in a way. Overall, Battle for Azeroth's final patch is actually a good one, in my opinion, but the ending is a disappointment that could have had much more in time and in depth. I truly hope this isn't the last we've seen of N'Zoth and the Black Empire as a whole. We still have both Xal'atath and Ajar out there, so one can hope something from them will come out of this. Ultimately, I think this patch was rushed, and Battle for Azeroth should have concluded with Sylvanas rather than N'Zoth, and the following expansion afterwards, it would have had him, the other old gods, and the Black Empire in the spotlight. But those are just my thoughts. A good patch full with some good things, just a poor way to end it all. But what are your guys' thoughts on Visions of N'Zoth? Did you like it? Did you hate it? What would you have done for the conclusion of this patch? Let me know down below. Go ahead and give this a like, give it a share, and well, if you didn't like it, suppose, give it a dislike, I guess. Ring that blessed bell if you want to get notified about this channel. Come and join us on the Discord, we would love to have you for more discussions. Maybe follow me on Twitter to hear me more often. Join me on Twitch to see me play the video games. I am streaming Warcraft 3 Reforged currently on Twitch around 6 PM Eastern Standard Time. Hope to see you there. Or maybe support me on Patreon. A little help goes a long way, and I would greatly appreciate it. All of those in the description down below, as well as some other things. But until next time, my friends, bye ya!